All right, everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Game Changers Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, based in Jacksonville, Florida. And we do this podcast with people who are changing the game of real estate all over the country. And this is a live show, guys. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments for our guest to answer. This week on the show, we have Cam Cathcart. Cam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. How you doing today?
Doing great, man. Thanks for coming on.
I'm pumped to be here.
So, for the people who don't know you, could you share a little bit about how you got into the real estate business and how that's led you to where you are today?
Yes. So I got into the real estate business back in 2019, and to be completely honest with you, it was just a need to make a little bit more money. I um, I worked at a job that I loved, but I was only making about $40,000 a year. And my wife and I, we were living paycheck to paycheck. And then my daughter, she had some uh, medical health issues that we got hit with some medical bills, and we couldn't afford them. And I remember just being like, hey, this isn't how I want to live the rest of my life. And so in late 2019, we bought our very first house to flip, and it did not go well. But luckily, we stayed with it. And in 2020, we went all in, and kind of the rest is history. So it's been a fun ride.
Gotcha. So, what does your company look like today?
Yeah. So right now I have kind of four different companies. One is Revel City Properties, and that is just a single family rental portfolio. So we have 65, and when I say we, it's me and my wife. We own 65 single family rental houses. It's about a $15 million portfolio. And then we have a flipping company, and that has, I don't know, 11 or 12 people on the team in the flipping company. We have tried to flip 100 houses a year. This year, in 2024, it was way under that. We were, I want to say, right around 60 houses.
Mm,
And then I have Cathcart Capital, which is just a fund that I started in that. It's a pretty new fund. We're kind of strategically picking off some Class A single family rentals that I probably wouldn't buy because they don't cash flow, but it's kind of an equity game, and have some partners in on it that are willing to wait it out.
mm.
And then have a company called Deal Flow where I teach what I do.
Gotcha. Okay. What does the team look like at the flipping company, the 11 to 12 people?
Yeah, so we have so it's me and my wife, and then we have a couple VAs on that team, and then we have Melissa, who is our marketing manager, Alicia, who is our lead manager. We have Tony, Alex, Justin, and Josh, who do acquisitions for us. We have Steve, who is our project manager, and Connor, who is our maintenance tech. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah. So, and then we have obviously a ton of 1099 people that are crews, but they don't work for the company. We try and keep them busy year round, but they don't work for the company.
Got it. We were talking a little bit offline about how, you were saying in the St. Louis market, like it's been a challenge recently, kind of from a marketing perspective. Do you want to talk a
For
little
sure.
bit more about that?
Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of competition. There's less people moving right now. At the end of the day, I think that's really what it boils down to. Is there's less people moving right now. I read somewhere that 75% of people are locked into an interest rate under 4%. I don't know if
Mm,
that's true. You'd have to, fact check me on that. But if I'm locked into an interest rate under 4%, prices have gone up since then, and interest rates have gone up. Like if you're moving, you're increasing your payment a lot. And so we're not seeing people like in 2020, 2021, people were moving for the fun of it because they could exchange houses and get a better house. Right now, you're not moving unless you have made a crazy amount of money and you're upgrading, or you're very very distressed. But that kind of middle ground, we're not seeing a lot of movement where it's just like, hey, um, I'm moving to a new house because we've always wanted a new house. Like I think people are right now waiting it out for interest rates to drop or prices to come back down. And I think that's like probably the number one issue that I'm seeing where we're not doing as much volume. Is just there's less movement in the market. Um, and then on top of that, man, we just went through the probably the hardest season ever to buy homes. Actually, I think historically, October, November, and December were the three lowest months of transactions since like the 70s. And it makes sense when you look up when are the worst times to sell a home or buy a home. It's always right around election season and then holiday season. And so we had election season kind of spill over right into Thanksgiving and to Christmas. And so the last 3 months have quite honestly been really really slow for our business. But we have seen it pick up a little bit here in January. Um, but as far as like the direct to seller marketing, man, we're trying to figure that out. Just like I think almost every company is. We don't have a perfect system. We've done PPL, PPC, direct mail, cold calling. We for a very short time back in 2022, before I got worried about getting sued, we were texting. We've kind of done it all, uh, and you know things work and then they don't, and so we're always kind of just trying to um, reinvent the wheel, I guess, if that makes sense. Or not reinvent the wheel, but we're always trying to figure out like what are the levers that we can be pulling to get more leads and to buy more houses.
Looking into kind of this year, I know you said your goal is 100 flips this year. What
Yeah,
levers do you think you're going to have to pull in order to reach that?
man, that's a great question. And so, and I want to kind of go back. When I say 100 flips, that's not 100 retail flips. That's 100 flips. That includes kind of wholesaling, which we're not a wholesaling company. We wholesale maybe a house a month, but that's wholesale, wholesale, and flips.
Mm-hmm.
What I've seen our company kind of do in the past is usually 50 to 60% is retail flips, and then 20% wholesale, 20% wholesale.
Gotcha. So I guess in order to get that kind of deal flow in this year, though, like, what do you think you might have to
Mhm.
change up,
Oh, yes.
or what are you
Sorry, I didn't
planning?
even answer.
Yeah,
I
you're good.
didn't, yeah. So we in our company we have two different ways that we get leads. We have connector leads, and so I'm huge on connector leads. My very
Mm,
first year in 2020, I bought close to 100 houses, and I didn't spend any money on direct to seller marketing. And that was just
mm,
networking with wholesalers, with real estate agents, with probate attorneys, with senior living facilities, with mold remediation companies. With I'm forgetting a bunch, property management companies. It was just networking. I was at every single meetup in St. Louis that there was. I was going to every real estate office, introducing myself, saying, "Hey, if you have any pocket listings, I'd love to be the first one to know." I was going to every property management company, um, and so I was really, really focused on that. And I think that we need to dive into that a little bit more in
mm,
2025. We kind of have lost sight of that and focused on the direct to seller marketing. And I would love to see a 50-50 split, or even connector
mm.
leads be able to bring in more leads and more buys off of connector leads in 2025 than from our direct to seller marketing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, like you
so,
obviously were really successful at doing that if you're able to buy 100 homes just from connections, right? Like, how did you go about that that allowed you to kind of buy that type of volume just from referrals?
Yeah. So, I mean, my number one thing when I talk to anybody that's wanting to get into real estate is you have to focus on relationships, and it's something that I'm naturally good at. I am a 7 on the Enneagram. I'm a high I. I'm an ENFP on the Myers Briggs. Like I'm 1,000,000% an extrovert, and so I love meeting new people. I love learning people's stories, who they are, where they're from, about their family, the things they like, the things they don't like. And so, like, honestly, and this isn't, I'm not trying to give you like a cop out answer on this, but there were some systems built around that, but it was really being a good person and doing life with other people, and
Mm,
people naturally wanted to sell me houses. And so like if somebody's watching this right now and they want to buy their first house, the easiest thing you can do is you can make a list of whatever market you're in. And if you're in any mid to major market, like there's going to be a ton of real estate meetups. And if you're in a market that doesn't have a real estate meetup, create your own. But make a list of every real estate meetup that is in your market, print off business cards or something, go to those with a smile on your face, be the first one there, the last one to leave, talk to every single person, pass out business cards, collect business cards, and then the next day sit down and make phone calls to all the people that you ran into, set up coffee meetings, one-on-one, sit there, learn about their lives, and tell them that you're looking to get into real estate. And there's some steps to that, because I think that before that you do have to determine like what your buy box is. One of the things that I don't think is a good idea is just to sit down with somebody and say, hey, teach me everything. Like you have to come kind of
mm,
prepared to deal with that. But that was what I did. I had a buy box. I was looking for 3 bed, 4 bath, or three or 4 bedroom, 2 bath houses, brick ranches in certain zip codes. And I would sit down with people, learn about their lives, and say, hey, if you have anything that matches this criteria, man, I'd love to know about it. And just through that, people started sending me deals. And then on top of that, man, I think this is something that is overlooked. Everybody's always trying to systematize everything. And I
mm,
think that is important at some point, especially for scalability purposes. But you can make a lot of money by just putting in the hard work. I would get a lead sent to me, and I'd hop in my car and I would go and drive it, and I would take pictures, and I would get them an offer within a couple of hours. Every single time I got a lead sent to me, and so that continued sending leads to me. They would know that I was at least putting in the effort versus,
mm,
hey, we work with people sometimes that, and we've actually done this some too, where it's like, hey, we're going to send out a preliminary offer before we go walk it to make sure it's worth our time. And I don't think that is a great look, especially if you're just starting out. I wanted all of the people that were sending me deals to know that, hey, I'm hungry. And at that time I was new too. So I didn't have like an established reputation. So I wanted to create that reputation. And so I put in the work for sure. When I first started, I was working 60, 70, 80 hour weeks.
you did mention before, obviously a lot of it you said is not systematizable, but you mentioned you did have a few systems built around you in order to do that. Like what were some of those systems?
Yeah. So, and there's a lot that's systematizable in the sense of like, hey, you walk a house, we use Podio, we upload our pictures. Here's our 4 comps within a quarter-mile radius that match this exact house. Here's our buy box. Here's our no buys, if it's on septic or off a main road. So we have all of those systems worked out. But when it comes to people, it really is just a relationship thing. And I think that if you try and over systematize that, sometimes you lose that. It turns
Mm,
into transactional and not relational. But what I will say is I did in Podio have every single person that I've ever met with. And when I would meet with them, I would take notes on them. And so, like, for instance, if we were having a
mm,
meeting right now, or if I met you and we kind of had a conversation before we started this, I would get done with that meeting and I would sit down and I would say, lives in Jacksonville, buys mobile homes on land, loves rural areas, using bandit signs and cold calling right now. And I would just take notes on you And then I'd put a follow-up date, whether that's 2 weeks, a month, to kind of depending on the conversation that we have. It's like, hey, is this somebody that I can do a lot of business with, or is this somebody that, hey, I might do business with in the future? I would set kind of a follow-up date. And so the way that I structured that was, if it was somebody that I thought I could do a lot of business with, and over time, if it was somebody that I was continuing doing business with, let's say I'm buying 10 plus houses a year from them. Honestly, I'm talking with them probably every day because they're sending me leads or we're talking about leads. But if not, I'm talking with them every single week.
Mm.
And so that would be like my platinum level. My gold level, if I'm buying, let's say 5 to 10 houses a year, I'm communicating with you every couple of weeks. If I haven't heard from you in a couple of weeks, in my Podio, I would have the last conversation that we have. I'd have a follow up date, and I would be calling you in 2 weeks if we hadn't heard from each other. Just saying, hey, what's up? How you doing? I would look at notes on our last conversation. I'd ask you questions about your family. And sometimes I would just call to hear how your life is doing, or how your life is going. And that would potentially lead to a deal. The silver level would be like, hey, I'm buying, 1 to 5 houses a year. I'm calling them once a month. And then the what I would call the bronze level, which those are people that I might not ever buy a house from, but they're good to have in my ecosystem. I'm probably calling them once a quarter. And so I did systematize like the way that I followed up with people, the way that I connected with people, the way that I remembered people. And I use Podio for all of that.
Gotcha. And then you were saying that you were networking with realtors, wholesalers. That's common ones I hear, but you also said like senior living facilities. I think you said mold remediation companies.
Oh yeah, for sure. Those are some of the best. Honestly, I've gotten my best wholesale deals ever from property management companies, and the reason that I've
Mm,
wholesaled those is because they're usually Class C areas. We don't buy a ton in Class C areas, but I would routinely just go and stop by or not senior living facilities, property management companies, and say, hey, if you have any clients that are wanting to sell a portfolio or sell their portfolio, please let me know, connect us. A lot of times they're real estate agents. I'll use, so I would tell them I'd use you as the buyers and sellers agent on this, but I would just
mhm,
love to know if any of your clients are selling portfolios. And so and I would just make sure that every property management company knew who I was and knew that I was buying. And so anytime a
mhm,
client was telling the property management company, hey, I'm thinking about exiting my portfolio, whether it's 2 houses, or I think the largest I ever bought was 77 houses. They would reach out to me first, uh, and a lot of times too, these are houses that tenants have lived in. They have to sell it off market. They can't run a bunch of people through them because they're not vacant. A lot of times they haven't had a lot of work done to them, so they're selling as is. And so they're actually really, really great leads. And
mm,
a fun story about a property management company. This was in 2020, I believe. But it's just a way that you can use connectors to buy houses. I called a property management company. I got the lady who I don't know if she owned it or she was high up there, and we chatted for uh, about 20 minutes and kind of told her what I did. And she kind of was talking about just life. And she was telling me that every Tuesday, she goes and plays softball in a senior women's softball league. And then they all go to Applebee's afterwards. And so, we were just hanging out talking, and I wrote that down in Podio. And she said she didn't have any houses for me at the time, but she'd keep me in mind. And this was probably on I don't remember exactly what day it was, but it was, let's say, Thursday. And on Tuesday, I set a reminder in my Podio to connect with her again. And so on Tuesday, it popped up, and I saw that, read through the conversation. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go buy Applebee's gift card and drop it off at her office for softball that night. And so I
mm,
did that, and she was super happy. And again, it's part of this is just building good relationships and caring for people. And honestly, like, I might have not ever gotten a good deal or a deal out of that, but um, dropped that off. She loved it, super thankful. 2 days later, she calls me with a guy who actually lived out of the country. He was selling a 30, I think it was a 35 or 36 home portfolio in kind of a classy area. I ended up locking it up. and wholesaling that for close to $100,000.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, but property management companies, senior living facilities, like a lot of times when somebody like my buy box, what I tell people, a lot of times is grandma clean houses. Like I want a house that somebody's cared for. They've taken care of the systems, the roof, the windows, but they just haven't updated the cosmetics. Those are my favorite types of houses. And
Mm,
what are a lot of those houses? Those are people that when they're ready to leave, they're a lot of times moving into a senior living facility. They don't want to deal with fixing anything up, making it list ready, the headache of listing it and having people through their house. And so I've connected with senior living facilities of, hey, anytime you have somebody that's coming in that wants to sell their house, let me know. And part of that is you have to build trust because they're not just going to pass that along to somebody that they know or think is going to take advantage of somebody or not take care of somebody. So I've had to build trust and do what I say I'm going to do over and over and over again. And to
mm,
senior living facilities, I'm presenting myself more as an educator of like, hey, I can buy the house cash as is, no contingencies. But if that doesn't work for them, we can help point them in the right direction or use some of our crews to rehab the house. We can list the house. Like we want whatever that elderly person wants. We're not trying to come in here and lowball them. I mean, obviously we have to make money, but I want to make sure that it's a win-win scenario. And so you do to do this, you do have to build trust and you have to do what you say you're going to do over and over and over again. And that's why I like connectors, is because if you do the build trust and you do what you say you're going to do, people will continue to sell your houses. And it holds me accountable, morally, ethically, to doing what I say I'm going to do over and over and over again. Because even though St. Louis is 3+ million people, the real estate, the real estate community is somewhat small. And so if I'm not fulfilling on my promises or fulfilling on the contracts I'm putting out, people would find out really quick, and it would honestly ruin my business.
mm. And you were saying mold remediation companies? Is
Yeah,
that was a
mold
plan for you?
remediation companies, junk removal companies.
Huh.
Again, when pipes burst in a house, who's the first person you call? It's and they create mold, and a lot of times they're empty, they're vacant because that's how the mold gets there. They're calling a mold remediation company. I just connect with mold remediation companies. Hey, if you're ever dealing with a house that needs a lot of work, just let the seller know, like, hey, I've got a buddy who would buy this as is. And mold remediation companies and junk removal companies, I don't buy a ton of houses from. It's 3 to 5 a year on each one, but junk removal companies. So, hey, if a tenant moves out and they've destroyed the house, who are they calling first? It's a junk removal company. And so just connecting
Mm,
with all of your different connectors and saying, hey, when you talk to a potentially distressed seller, I want to be the first person that you connect them with. And another, this is a fascinating one. I've never personally done this, but one of my mentors, he did this. And he's kind of the one who taught me about these connector leads. Is he connected with bowling alleys, and his thing was like, hey, bowling alleys know alley owners know everything that's going on in their community. They know who's selling, when they're selling, what they're selling for. They know when somebody passes away. They know when somebody's going into a senior living facility. And so, and not like the bowling alleys that are new and have the, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a Lucky Strike. He's connecting with like the mom and pop bowling alleys where people come and drink every night and bowl. And he was buying 15, 20 houses a year from bowling alleys. So,
huh.
yeah. So there's so many ways. One of the things that I was talking about with my team is we're just processing and trying to think outside of the box. Like how can we build more connectors? Was like the local dive bars. Again, the bartender is going to know everything that's going on in that community. And we
Mm,
haven't done this yet, so I'm kind of just talking out loud. But this could be an idea. Is like connecting with the the bartender at local dive bars because they know who's selling, who's passed away, who's getting divorced,
mm,
and they could easily be somebody that just passes you off leads.
yeah. And then, like, if you were to hire for this role, like what would you be looking for? Like someone who would just be a relationship buyer like this? And I'm asking
Yeah.
this
So
question because I'm considering making this hire. So, like, what would you look
no,
for?
that's a really great question. And one thing that I think that I'm learning is that and I don't have this dialed in yet, but
Mhm.
the um, personality profile for direct to seller leads is different from that of connector leads. And
Mm,
I have always just my acquisition managers, you're doing both. Like you part of your job is buying connector houses, part of your job is buying direct to seller houses. And there is a lot of similarities in it, but I think that you don't have to be as passionate about building relationships. I think you actually have to. We're huge on the disc assessment. I think you kind of have to be a higher S&C direct to seller because it's a process that you're following. You're asking the same questions over and over. You're following up consistently with direct to seller. On the connector side of things, you're still doing some of that, but you have to be a huge people person and you have to be hungry to go out and generate your own leads. And so I think like if you're looking at a disc assessment, really high D's and really high I's, and probably a blend of a an ID or a DI is going to be really, really great at this because they love people. They're driven to go find leads, make money. They're You're going to get annoyed with them because they're going to be bad at follow up and they're not going to have a set schedule. But you're looking for somebody that is driven and that loves people and that can relate with people. And honestly, is like, hey, this is running it through like, is this somebody that I'd want to sit down and grab a beer with? Because
mm,
that is literally what I did. I don't do a lot of acquisitions anymore, but that's what I did for 3 years was coffees, uh, beers, meetups, like just meeting and connecting with people.
yeah, I gotcha. So
Does
are
that
you?
make sense? Where it's kind of a different, I think it is a different personality type. I don't have that dialed in yet, so I can't give you the exact personality profile, but it is something that I've been processing that I think these are probably two different acquisition managers.
That was to give my next question. So are you thinking about splitting that role into two?
I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I think so.
And then would you hire multiple people in that relationship buyer type role, or?
Yeah, so again, right now it is, hey, I've got my acquisition managers and they're in charge of both.
Mm,
I'm kind of, I'm saying things that I've never done and maybe just a little bit processing out loud where I don't know exactly what it looks like. But I think, and I say this because I've done it, that if you hire the right person, they can buy, uh, they can buy 50 plus houses a year from connectors.
mm,
Um, and and if you gave them a particular niche to focus on, you could hire 3 to 4 people that's all they focus on. And so, for instance, actually, you interviewed he was actually a person that I worked for and was absolutely amazing when I first started real estate, and kind of is one of the people that taught me about connector leads. But Lucas Walls,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, and so it their company, and I don't know if they're still doing this because I haven't been with them for years, but they were hiring people, and they would give them particular niches. And so for me, and you could go outside of that niche, but it was like you really are supposed to focus on this. And for me, I was there a little bit before they started doing that, and so I was over just any sort of connectors that I could get. But they were hiring people like you are focused on real estate agents. Every single real estate agent in St. Louis is supposed to know who you are, and if they get a pocket listing, they're calling you. They would hire somebody. Hey, you are focused on probate attorneys. Every probate attorney in St. Louis knows your name, and when they have a lead, they're calling you. You are focused on senior living. You are focused on property management. You are focused
Mm,
on wholesalers, and so they would have niches where, hey, this connector, this is all they focus on. So I
interesting.
think that could be a good
Yeah.
idea. I haven't tried it yet, so
Yeah. That's really interesting. That was like working pretty well, for, at least that for them that they were splitting it up into those
yeah,
niches.
they're an amazing. I think they're doing 200 plus flips a year.
Okay.
So they're crushing it, and they're doing direct to seller marketing as well. But
Yeah.
But they're crushing it. Yeah.
Cool. So I know another thing that you kind of want to talk about was mindset. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I just love talking about this. One, because I'm a newer investor as well. I've only been doing this for 5 years now, and have been pretty successful. And uh, and I think a huge part of it was because of my mindset, and maybe maybe not my mindset. Well, yeah, I guess it is mindset, but also just like setting goals and going for them. And so I want to share I guess, my story. And I, Sometimes I don't like sharing my story because people, they want to know like what's the tactical, strategic things. Um, but my story was I was actually a pastor, which I think is also when you're talking about like, hey, what about like a relationship manager or somebody that's over connectors? I think pastors are probably really great people because that's what I did was like I just dealt with people and loved on people as a pastor, and that translated really well into building relationships with connectors. But my story is I was a pastor before I got into real estate. Absolutely loved what I was doing. It was an incredible job, but I only made $40,000 a year, and uh, my wife and I, we were paycheck to paycheck when I was making $40,000 a year, but we didn't have any kids, and we could make that work. But then we had our first daughter, who is now 7, but she just turned 7, but her name's Riley. Um, and when Riley was born, we were stretched so thin. We at any given time we'd have a couple $100 in our bank account. I was driving for Uber to make a little extra money. I was getting onto Craigslist free and Facebook Marketplace free, and I was getting free couches, bringing them back to my house, and trying to sell them for 50 or $100. I was just doing anything that I could to make a little extra money, and still loved what I did, and still continued to do that as a pastor, just trying to make a little bit of extra money. And we were making ends meet every month. We would do just enough to make ends meet. But then in it would have been 2018 when my daughter was about a year old. It was the end of 2018. We gave her peanut butter for the first time, and she went into anaphylactic shock. And uh, and so we obviously threw her in the car, rushed her to the hospital. Ended up, like, at the time, I'm not looking up on my insurance, hey, what's in network, what's out of network, and we ended up taking her to a hospital that was privately owned or something like that, and it wasn't in network, and we got hit with a $15,000 hospital bill towards the end of 2018. And I'll never forget that moment because I had the bill in the mail. $15,000 could have been $10 million at the time. And I sat there at the dinner table, and honestly, I felt like a massive failure. I was like, this is not the life that I had envisioned for me and for my family. And I don't want to put my wife through this. I don't want to put my kids through this. Obviously, like, anytime there's a medical expense, anytime a car breaks down, anytime we want to go on vacation and we don't have the money for it. So I decided, honestly, that night, like, I'm going to start figuring something else out. Um, and so I started listening to every podcast that I could about just making money. During that time, actually, and I have pictures on my phone, we couldn't make my student loan payments. We couldn't make our house payments. It was miserable. It was the lowest of the low. I just felt like a failure. But I stumbled across a podcast, and on it, a guy was talking about real estate. He made the comment that, and I don't know if this is true, but 90% of self-made millionaires do it in real estate. And I was like, man, I want to be a millionaire. And so I started doing more research on real estate, and I came across a lot of people know this podcast, but the Bigger Pockets podcast. And So I started listening to that, and just listening to every episode I could. And this was probably beginning to middle of 2019, and just consuming as much content as I could. And there was there was a guy on there, Brandon Turner, that I would listen to, and he was in his sea shed in Maui, and he would talk about how he had used real estate to create financial freedom for his family and moved to Maui. And now he was hosting this podcast in his sea shed. And I remember like thinking to myself, that's amazing. I want to do that. And back up a little bit, before Riley was born, my wife and I's 5-year wedding anniversary, we came here, and on the last night we sat at dinner, and we were talking about like how much fun it would be to raise our kids in Hawaii. But we kind of laughed about it because we looked at real estate prices and we are like, there's no way we could ever afford that. That's a pipe dream. It's not doable. And so then fast forward 3 years later, and I'm listening to Brandon. He's in his house in his sea shed in Maui, and I'm like, that is what I want to do. And so I told my wife, hey, we're going to get into real estate. And so what's funny is I bought a 10x Grant Cardone 10x like planner, and on it has write down your goals. And every day I wrote down move to Maui, buy a house in Maui, own a house in Maui. Every single day, I still every once in a while flip through that. And so we got into real estate, and we started making good money. And kind of built up our business. And in 2021, we actually, I saw that there was a Maui mastermind going on that Brandon was hosting. And so, and I'd been writing Move to Maui in my planner for years. At this time, it'd probably been 2 years. And so my wife and we came out to the Maui mastermind. And so here's a crazy story. And this is kind of where I'm going to like vision mindset. So the night before the mastermind, we had a get together at Brandon's house. We were all staying at a hotel, but we had a get together at Brandon's house. Next day, the very first session was a guy named Rich Fecky, and he talked about creating the like he talked about the future you, and he took us through this exercise where basically had everybody close their eyes, and it was like, hey, you go up into space and then you come back down, but you fast forwarded 10 years into the future, and you land on the ground. You realize you're standing outside of your house in 10 years, and you walk up to the house and you knock on the door. And the person answers the door, and it's you. And you're supposed to be like taking inventory of everything that's around you as you're going through this exercise. Like, what is the person that you're talking to, the future you? What do they sound like? What do they look like? What does your house look like? And he wanted us to go into really specific detail of like, what does the yard look like? What does the house look like? Where is it at? What does the air smell like? What do your facial features look like? What's your family look like? And so we went through this 20-30 minute exercise as I'm just visualizing the 10-year future you. And so Brandon's house, it's a beautiful house. He has his detached ohana, the sea shed that he works in, a lanai that overlooks the ocean. Because I'd been there the night before, and I'd been there night before. I'd been listening to Brandon on Bigger Pockets for a long time. As he was doing that, what I visualized was Brandon's house. Like I'm walking up the stairs to the lanai. I'm overlooking the ocean. I see the pool and the sea shed down to the side. I walk into the house, and it's messy, but in a good way, because it's lived in, and we have kids that love to have fun and be outside. And I'm just visualizing all of this. And so we get done with that exercise. We're supposed to take notes on it. And so I write down exactly what I visualize. And then we get done with that weekend. I go back to St. Louis, and legitimately, this is crazy. Every single morning, I go I have coffee, and while I'm having coffee, I'm visualizing that. I'm just
Mm,
the money that it takes to do that, the team that I need to build to do that. I'm visualizing like living in this house in Maui overlooking the Pacific Ocean at sunset, talking to my future self. Um, in doing that exercise, it helped align every single day where it's like there's a reason and there's a purpose for everything that I'm doing. And when I feel like, even looking like at the not necessarily a business side, but just like the future me wasn't stressed. The future me was in love with his wife and with his kids. And so like every single day, I would run things through the mindset of like, is this getting me closer or farther away to future you? Um,
mm,
and so it helped my life so much. And I would encourage anybody that's watching this, like, go through that exercise, um, and and really, really like dive into that because it helps align every single day. If you go visit yourself every single morning, and I know that sounds really, really weird, but if you go visit yourself every single morning, your day will be aligned with that version of future you have in your head, and it will change your life. But I started doing that. And our because of those things, like our real estate business continued to take off. We built up a massive rental portfolio. Massive, a strong word. I know people have way more, but 65 single family doors that's worth about 15 million. We have a 50% loan to value on that. It's cash flowing around 13 to $15,000 a month, and then plus our flips and everything, and things just go really well. Um, and and because I had been writing in my 10x planner every single day, move to Maui, because I'd been visualizing like move to Maui every single day. When we got to the point where we could afford it, my wife and I were like, well, this was our goal. Like let's move to Maui. And so in 2023, we moved here to Maui, and we've been running our business remotely ever since. But uh, uh, and I didn't know Brandon that well before I moved out here, but Brandon and I have become really close friends. And over time being here, he asked me to co-host his podcast with him, which is the Better Life Podcast. I think it's either the most listened to real estate podcast or top 3 or 4 most listened to real estate podcasts in the world. And so got to do that, and that was all just from visualizing. Um,
mhm,
and seeing myself, what does the future me look like? And uh, there, the cool part is, and this is the crazy part. So I envisioned myself in that moment with 2 things. One, inside the house, there was a ton of kids. I love kids. At the time, we had 3 kids, but there was more kids in the house. And like I said, it was messy, but in a good way, like the way a lived-in house is supposed to feel. And it was
mhm,
Brandon's house. Um, and I'll even get emotional talking about this sometimes. Where so right now, I'm sitting in the sea shed. I own it
oh,
now. Yeah, I bought Brandon's house, and my wife is pregnant with twins, and
oh,
I think like when and a lot of that's God. I'm also a religious person, but like I also think like I have put myself, because I visualized it every single day, I've put myself in position after position after position to get where I am. And that guy in 2019, I was listening to his podcast in his sea shed, um, and saying, that's what I want to do that. I want to be like that. Like it just happened. And literally this is the sea shed that he hosted Bigger Pockets in for years. And we bought his house from him. So I think that's, I'm really passionate about visualizing, because if you don't know where you want to go, you're going to wander around aimlessly. But if you have a set
mhm,
plan of here's where I want to go, here's where I want to be, here's what I want to do, you're going to have a path every single day to get there. And there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. We had a ton. It wasn't like it was just like a rocket ship to where we are. There were a lot of highs and lows, but we had a direction that we were headed over the last 5 years. And so yeah, I'm sorry for taking up so much time about that, but I think that's a really fun story, and it's something that I want people to know. Just like, hey, this worked for me, and I think it can work for a lot of people.
Are you doing any of that mindset stuff with the people who work on your team?
Um, yes, I mean we definitely have vision. That's a great question. Probably not as much as I should be.
Hmm.
Um, Probably not as much as I should be. But we definitely have our goals and our vision for our team and where we want to head, and we reiterate those goals over and over and over again.
Gotcha. Cool. And you were saying like earlier, like you guys obviously have a 65 door rental portfolio.
Yeah.
Um, as you were acquiring properties, I know this sometimes is an issue that people run into in the business. It's like you kind of got to make the decision to keep some and you got to make the decision to sell some. Like, how did you make that decision when you were building that portfolio?
Yeah, I wish, especially in 2020 and 2021, I wish that I'd kept more.
Mm,
But we we were uh, we were trying to make money too, and sometimes at that time, like I was like, would I rather make $40,000 flipping this, or would I rather make no money but add a ton of equity and monthly cash flow by keeping it? And so it was decisions that, looking back in 2020 and 2021, I wish we'd have kept a lot more properties.
mm,
But the biggest thing was for me was like, hey, we bought properties in Class B plus neighborhoods,
mm,
where they would cash flow but also appreciate, and we'd have a really great tenant base. And so if it kind of matched these certain zip codes, and we were buying, if you looked at our rental portfolio, every single house is the exact same. They're 3 bed, two
mm,
bath, 4 bed, two bath, brick ranches, and B plus neighborhoods.
mm,
Um, they're probably worth, I mean, at the time, they were probably worth uh, 200 to 250. Now most of them are probably worth 250 to 300, and they rent for $2,000 a month. But I would burr all of those. So
mm,
like my stereotypical like purchase price would be 100 to, let's say, $130,000. We'd put 40 to $50,000 into them, appraise out of them, but they're literally all the exact same house,
mm.
just over and over again.
Are you managing those internally or you've handed off property management to someone else?
We have our own property management company that handles them internally, and I mean, say property management company. We've got 2 employees and in that
Mm,
business, but we don't have to think about them a lot. So
mm,
we have um, uh, oh, why can't I think? My wife runs that. We have a maintenance tech who, anytime like somebody needs something, he's going out fixing the houses. He's doing biannual walkthrough, so we're getting into every house every 6 months. And then we have a tenant coordinator who's just getting tenants for us. But we're typically always at 100% occupancy. And then I'm trying to think. I don't think we have any tenants behind on rent right now.
huh.
Never had to, knock on wood, but we've never had to evict anybody. We've
Wow.
Part of that's because of the areas that we're in, and part of that is we definitely take care of the houses. I don't see our rental portfolio, even though it is cash flowing about $13,000 a month. I don't see that as like my vehicle to making money. That's the flipping business. That's the coaching business.
Mm,
The portfolio is kind of our generational wealth. Where if we stopped right now and properties continue to appreciate it at 3 to 4% a year, by the time I'm 65, it'll be worth $65 million, and we're going to keep adding to
huh.
that. So
Sure.
that's the goal.
What made you make the decision to do the management in-house versus outsourcing it?
Because of kind of what I just said, like we are, when we own it, we're going to care more about it.
Mm,
And we want to keep, like, we burr out of every house. And so we're not buying as is or turnkey houses, or we're not doing the bare minimum to get tenants in there. What's new vinyl plank flooring, new kitchens, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, new systems. We're doing really, really good work on our houses before we rent those out.
Hmm.
And so we want to take care of that. And we want to
Mm,
make sure that we are stewarding our portfolio really, really well, because it really isn't for us. It's for our kids and future generations.
gotcha. Makes sense. Well, we're kind of getting close to the end here, and there's always two questions I like to
Yeah.
ask at the end of the show. And the first is, what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation that you have ever experienced in a real estate deal?
Yeah. And I, I've gotten these questions before, and I know that a lot of people talk about um, finding dead bodies is something that I hear a lot. But I would say that's the craziest. That's the craziest. But it was a little unique, and we actually, off of a direct to seller lead, I got a call, and there was a guy who his father had just passed away, and he wanted to sell his dad's house, and so it was a pretty normal call. Like that happens a lot where we deal with somebody that's passed away. Um, and so we went on the lead and walking through the house, and we opened the master bedroom, and his dad is laying in bed, dead, just laying there, dead. And come to find, and it took me back, because I had never seen that before. I've never come across a dead body outside of that one. But got to talking with him, and his dad had literally died that morning. So he called me. It had to have been within an hour of his dad passing away. He wanted to get rid of that. So that was just that was a crazy experience. That walking in on a dead body was was a little unique. And then we could get into like the nasty side. Like I have dealt with, unfortunately, a lot of murder scenes where they've obviously taken the bodies, but there's still everything else that has happened on the floors and the walls. And those are always just scary and eye opening and shocking. And then one other time, I was in a pretty rough part of town, and it was probably like 6, 7 o'clock at night. I'd gotten a lead and wanted to walk it, but it was dark out and there was no electricity in the house. And I was in the basement, and I heard a bunch of squatters. They walked in and were gonna camp out in the house. And so fortunately for that, I was in the basement. I was scared to death. There was no exit in the basement. So one of the things that I've done, I just have learned, like in rougher parts of town, if it's a dead end street, to point my car towards the way out, so I don't have to pull down and turn around. And I've learned, like, I walk in the front door and I immediately go and I unlock the back door to give me two clear exits. But so I've learned some stuff. I mean, I've probably walked. Let me think. I've probably walked, say, 4 or 5 thousand houses, and so over time, I've definitely learned, like, what are what do I need to do to be safe in these situations. But in this one, I was stuck in the basement. But so I was actually really nervous on this one, but I just let them know that there was somebody in the basement, and they cleared out. So it didn't end up being a big deal. But I
Yeah,
think that was the highest my heart rate ever got, was really rough part of town, squatters in the house, and me in the basement with no way out.
gotcha. Jeez.
Yeah.
Um, so the second question I always like to ask, it's more for the newer people listening to the show, which is, if you could go back in time, give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for that first deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Um, I would tell myself it's going to be way harder than you thought it was going to be, but it's going to be way more rewarding
Mm,
than you ever thought was imaginable. Um,
mm,
and I say that to say, I never thought, like, when I'm speaking on visualization and mindset, And one of the reasons I did that was to trick myself into thinking that I could be where I am. And look, I am. But
Mm,
in the back of my mind, I never thought that this was possible.
mm,
I never thought that I could, in 5 years, go from being negative $60,000 in loan debt to a multi millionaire.
mm,
So it's been I have exceeded kind of my own expectations for myself, but I have put in a lot of work, and there's been a lot of sleepless nights. There's been a lot of stress involved with it, and I've had to have really hard conversations with people, and yeah, there's been times where we've thought we were going bankrupt. Like there's been all of that, and
mm,
so I didn't realize that when you sign up for a life as an entrepreneur, it's going to be stressful. And I think that I've grown to love that stress. I've grown to love. I see it as a privilege that I um, get to have that stress in my life in a weird way.
mm.
But I didn't know that when I signed up to get into real estate. I didn't realize that the burden that was going to come with that. But it's also been way more rewarding than I ever thought was imaginable.
Fair enough. Well, Cam, if people want to connect with you after the show, how can they go about getting in touch with you?
Yeah, my Instagram is probably going to be the best bet, and it's just Cam period Cathcart at Cam period Cathcart. You could look up Deal Flow Real Estate's kind of my coaching program
Mm,
if you wanted to look me up there. But really, I would just say Instagram is probably the best bet.
cool. Well, awesome, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much.